There is no problem of freedom of speech in India. The problem in India is freedom after the speech.
There is something very relevant that you're trying to discuss in that book, or at least what people should understand. How do you define the difference between independence and freedom?
We fought for freedom and we fought for independence. We achieved independence. Now our Indian billionaires, their profits come from what? From exploitation of public resources. Chairman, whatever I said, chairman would say, important point, it should be noted. Knowing fully well that it will not come in the report. He knew it, I knew it. We have both done that dance before. How many national newspapers wrote an editorial criticizing the treatment of Siddiq Kapur? How many? Find me one editorial. If you want to do challenging journalism, you will be challenged. Make no mistake about it. Average national daily gives 0.67% of front page space to news of rural origin.
ഇന്നത്തെ മാധ്യമങ്ങൾക്കിടയിൽ ഒരുപക്ഷെ ഏറ്റവും അധികം ശ്രദ്ധ ലഭിക്കാത്ത രണ്ട് വിഭാഗങ്ങളാണ് കൃഷിക്കാരും ഗ്രാമീണ മേഖലയും. ഈ രണ്ട് മേഖലകളെക്കുറിച്ചും കഴിഞ്ഞ 3 ദശാബ്ദത്തോളമായി നിരന്തരം റിപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരുന്ന ഒരു മുതിർന്ന മാധ്യമപ്രവർത്തകൻ പി സായിനാഥ്, അദ്ദേഹമാണ് ഇന്ന് ദ ഫോർത്തിൻ്റെ ബുൾസൈയിൽ നമ്മോടൊപ്പമുള്ളത്. സോ താങ്ക് യു സോ മച്ച് ഫോർ സ്പീക്കിംഗ് ടു ദ ഫോർത്ത്. I actually introduced you as a writer and a journalist. But talking about your books, it's been a very long gap between the two books. It's been almost like 20 years. But being somebody who has been very actively reporting and reporting in depth on the rural India, the farmers issue and other crises, what made you think about writing something about the freedom fighters?
Firstly, my self-image, the way I see myself, I am a reporter. Even the books I've written are really based on reporting stories that I did. All the stories in the new book, not all, 80% of them, appeared in much smaller form in the Hindu, on People's Archive of Rural India. But I kept going back to those characters over 20 years and kept enriching the material. Second thing, by the way, that all the characters are from rural India. So there is total continuity there. All the characters are from rural India. 2 of them now live in urban India, in Chennai, R. Nalakannu and N. Sankaraya. But both of them came from villages in Tirunelveli way back in the 1920s. 30s. So for me it's a continuing thing of this. The other thing is that there is a very big connection, say, between some of the farmers. As I said, these are agrarian people, not just farmers, but non-farm agrarian people. For me, when I saw the farmers struggle at Delhi, in Singhu, Tikri, I was standing on the platform addressing the audience, and a lot of metal was glinting in my eyes in the sun. Winter, but good sun. So I was wondering what that metal thing, like someone flashing a mirror in your eyes. There were 100, 150, maybe about 100 ex-servicemen, soldiers, with all their medals. There were 200 medals staring me in the face. The point is that the Indian Jawan is a Kisan in uniform. Always. Even in 1857, the soldiers who rose against the British, they were all farmers and farming community laborers, people like that. They were all rural. It was not the people of Lucknow, Meerut and Kanpur who rose, the cities. It was the soldiers who were present in those cantonments. They were all peasants in uniform. So I see no, great deviation one way or the other.
Again, sir, sticking on to the book, there is something very relevant that you're trying to discuss in that book, or at least what people should understand. How do you define the difference between independence and freedom?
Every one of the 15 characters in the book wanted me to understand that difference. Each spoke about it differently, some very indirectly, some very directly. The first line on the first page of the book is a quote from a man called Captain Bao. That is Captain Elder Brother, like Captain Dada. In 1943, he was part of an underground parallel government in the region of Satara, including Sangli, all those areas. Satara in 1943, a group of farmers, workers declared independence for Satara, and they held 600 villages. For 3 years, the British Raj could not enter or function properly in those villages. The night patrols, the police would come, hurry through the village and run, because they couldn't. He was the founder of the armed wing. The government was known as Prati Sarkar. The armed wing was Tufan Sena, the whirlwind army. He answers your question in one line. And that's the first line. We fought for two things. We fought for freedom and we fought for independence. We achieved independence. Freedom was not. Every one of them is telling you freedom is a much larger project than independence. Independence is throwing out the foreign ruler. That you've achieved. But have you achieved what you promised your people in your constitution, in the directive principles of state policy? Freedom from hunger, freedom from injustice. So that is the point he is making, and all of them are making. Freedom is a much larger project. Independence you achieved.
Perhaps we are living at a time when India's press freedom index is going down and down. Why do you think this is happening? Is it the media's decision, or is it the big media house's choice to compromise, or is there an external pressure on them?
It's both factors combined, plus one or two others. The first thing is, in the last 30 years, the media have been completely corporatized. Corporates will make their decisions on what to say, what not to say, on the basis of profit. Now, many of these corporations, see, the biggest owner of media in the country is the richest corporate leader, Mukesh Ambani. You look at your ETV, Malayalam, it's not owned by Ramoji Rao, it's owned by Mukesh Ambani. Only the Telugu channels of ETV are still owned by the original owners. For the last 10-15 years, all the other ETV channels, ETV Kannada, ETV Tamil, they're all owned by Mukesh Ambani's, one of his ventures. Now, our Indian billionaires, their profits come from what? From exploitation of public resources, from contracts with governments. I get the KG gas basin to explore. I get offshore oil exploration rights. These are all public resources which either are being leased to them or are being privatized to them. So that is, it makes a dependent. You're not going to offend. I will not offend the government. I'll lose my contract. Tomorrow they won't renew mining contract. Tomorrow they won't renew the oil exploration contract. So I'm going to be very careful about saying anything about them. The second side is the government side. You now have the single most intolerant government in your history, in your independent history. When they fell to 142 rank in the World Press Freedom Index, it was not a surprise, but let me tell you about my personal experience. When they fell to 142, Government of India doesn't care what you think, but if it comes from a Gora in the West, then they get very agitated. That's why they banned the BBC documentary. That's why they raided the BBC office. So anyway, at that time they were very angry and they decided to rebut the ranking. So they, at the highest levels of government, the senior most bureaucrat, the Union Cabinet Secretary, who only takes his orders from one person above him, he directed the Information and Broadcasting Ministry to create a very senior committee, index monitoring cell, which would rebut the conspiracy or maligning of freedom of press in India or freedom of speech in India. First of all, I want to tell you this. India is a very peculiar country. There is no problem of freedom of speech in India. The problem in India is freedom after the speech. You can say anything you want, right? After that, the consequences that come, those are the problems. So the problem in India is freedom after the speech. Anyway, they started this committee, packed 11 senior bureaucrats from PIB, from INB ministry, and they were working to create a rebuttal, a reply to the World Press ranking. Suddenly somebody told them, "Arey, you're having a committee on freedom of press. Might be a good idea to have one or two journalists also." So then they approached two journalists, me and another, one very famous anchor. I shall not name him today. So they asked both of us, "Will you join?" I said, "I will join conditionally. I'm not interested in replying to somebody in France. I am interested if I do my ranking, you will fall lower than 142. So don't ask me to come and reply to them. Let us, if you're saying we will examine freedom of press in India and as experienced by Indian journalists, then I'm happy to sit on your committee." They said, "Yes, yes." See, the chairman, one of the great achievements in that thing, the other journalist, the senior television anchor. See, by the way, I was the only person in the 13 members who spoke and raised issues. Others were all bureaucrats and, they were taking notes, and chairman, whatever I said, chairman would say, "Important point, it should be noted," knowing fully well that it will not come in the report. He knew it, I knew it. We have both done that dance before in different committees. The chairman would say, "Yes, yes, important point." But one of the great Ripley's, believe it or not, achievements, have you ever heard of a TV anchor remaining silent for 4 hours? Have you ever heard of a TV anchor remaining silent for 4 minutes? But my colleague remained silent 2 meetings, 2 hours, 2 hours. He did not say a word. At the beginning of the third meeting, he said he was too busy and he left. They replaced him with 2 others who also successfully remained silent during the meetings. So every time then finally, they created a draft report. The brilliant thing about the draft report, Nowhere it used the word draft. The email said, we are sending you the draft report. Please go through, make your suggestions, etc. The first paragraph, first page is full of praise for me because they're hoping he gave his time, made valuable inputs, not one of which input is in the report, because they thought that on reading that I would be flattered and pleased and pass the report. I did not. I wrote to them a dissent note, call it independent note, whatever. I said that nothing of what we discussed. For instance, the draft report was saying security forces have played a heroic role in protecting the safety of journalists in Kashmir. I said, why don't we bring the journalists of Kashmir to a hearing of the committee? Let them tell us how heroically they have been protected. So I wrote a detailed rebuttal, and I think for the first time in political history of India, a high power committee appointed at the behest of the top bureaucrat in the country, when I sent my note in, the committee disappeared. Committee appointed at the behest of the Union Cabinet Secretary. That committee disappeared. Then I sent it back 3 times. In between, I got one small mail from a junior PIB official saying, sir, I was on tour, I couldn't see. Immediately, I sent the report 3 times. Then the email ID disappeared. And next year, the ranking fell to 150. So, this is the state of freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of expression in the country. Now, there is both. There is the element of 3 elements at least. One is fear. There is serious fear. Those who run journals, websites on donations, in many cases, several cases, the donor withdraws because you are critical of the government. They don't want to get into trouble. Second, there is ideological affinity. Many of the corporate media people are also sharing the fundamentalist ideology of the government. Right. According to me, India for the last decade is run by a coalition of socio-religious fundamentalists and economic market fundamentalists. And the bed occupied by this happy marriage, that is what I call corporate media. Now the corporate media people are complicit. They are earning their profits from the suppression of free speech. Please look at the fact, please tell me, how many national newspapers, leave Kerala alone, how many national newspapers wrote an editorial criticizing the treatment of Siddiq Kapur? How many? Find me one editorial. Individual journalists, I wrote a letter appealing to Kerala government to intervene on his behalf. Individual journalists is different. Institutionally, no major newspaper, forget campaign, they did not condemn in an editorial the ill treatment and arrest and ill treatment of Kapur. Like that, there are many other journalists who have been ill treated. That's why when the BBC documentary ban came along on Rajdeep Sardesai show, I said, I'm grateful that because it happened to the BBC, this issue is being discussed. Much worse is happening to us every day. That doesn't get discussed. We are not Gora, we are not white-skinned, we are not Western media. Indian 720 journalists at least have died of COVID-19. How many people in the media know that? Very large number of them in Maharashtra. These are your stringers. people earning 5,000, 4,500 rupees a month. Their families are in debt of 5 lakhs, 6 lakhs because of the hospitalization, for which they had to borrow money from money lenders. Nothing. And the newspapers, do you know that on one great thing Mr. Modi did, which I supported, March 24th when he gave the speech, lockdown, 5 minutes later Government of India put out a list of essential services. For the first time, media was there, journalism was there. So I said, very good. I said, I don't mind going out and beating a plate for this. Now, essential service, what does it mean? It means that you can function. Nobody can stop you from doing your job. The second thing essential service means, security of your job. You cannot be thrown out of your job. You cannot dismiss someone from fire brigade, from hospital, you can't. Those are essential services. In the next 2 years, Indian media, corporate media, laid off 3,000 to 3,500 journalists, but the government said nothing, and 10 to 15,000 non-journalist media workers, cameramen, technicians, audio, studio people, 10 to 15,000 of them have been laid off. You can see the affidavit of Delhi Union of Journalists in the court. They say 3,000 journalists at least till May 2022. So what is your, so one, the corporate media bosses could do anything because your government let them get away with it. Two, there is the fear that makes many people withdraw from speaking up, though this is a country where journalism has had a tradition of speaking up, and except during the emergency when they showed such cowardice. After the emergency, there was an explosion of journalism and free speech. But when this emergency, if it ever gets over, now the media are corporate owned. They will still function on the lines of whoever is in power, could be another government tomorrow, whoever is in power kowtow before them. So there is fear, there is profit, there is ideological collaboration.
You have been part of this, as we call as corporate journalism, at least an institution, for a long time. It's been around some 8 years since you have left what we call as
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Almost. No, I quit officially. I ended in June 2014.
Yeah.
But I stopped functioning. I took my last 6 months as paid leave.
Okay, all right. So after that, you started a media organization of your own. How difficult or easy has that choice been, and do you really regret that?
I don't regret it 1 minute, but it has been very difficult. It's never been easy. See, I'm also a journalism teacher, and I always, the first class, I tell my students, last 37 years, if you want to do challenging journalism, you will be challenged. Make no mistake about it. You can go through your career without doing challenging journalism. You can have a very healthy career. You can retire, draw your pension. If the government spares your pension, which even those are now being destroyed, by putting pension funds in completely bogus, worthless places. But the risk of being destroyed exists. I'm not saying they have done it, but I'm saying your pensions are no longer safe and they're pretty worthless in terms of inflation and money and everything else. But if you have, for me, it was a decision even before that when the corporate media, the giant media, are ignoring rural India. Average national daily gives 0.67% of front page space to news of rural origin. People living in rural areas, 69% of the population. So 0.67% of space on the front page for 69% of the population. It is absolutely improper. It's dangerous for journalism. It's dangerous for democracy. You only cover those people when maybe there is flash floods in Idukki. You have to cover. You have to get the footage. You don't cover their lives at all. So it had to happen. So we started the People's Archive of Rural India, totally dedicated to rural India. Though we also cover parts of urban India, we cover rural migrants in the urban areas. Now we are covering in 14 languages. We do not accept and do not carry advertising. I think advertising has destroyed the soul of journalism in the last 30 years. Look at during the COVID pandemic. 1 month there was brilliant reporting from Uttar Pradesh about the bodies on the banks of the Ganga, the bodies on the banks of the Sarayu. And then what happened? State government and central government withdrew advertising. In 1 month everybody shut up. Except one paper, Dainik Bhaskar, and see what has happened to them. Raids, tax raids, ED raids, everything. So without advertising, it's very difficult. And but we have taken on that challenge that we will run on public support, donations. Nor do we don't have foreign funds. We don't have an FCRA. Last 2 years, we have not even applied for an FCRA. And those who have FCRA, look at what is happening to them. So it's very difficult, and it will get, I know, more difficult. But we do it because it's our duty to Indian journalism, to Indian audiences. We will do it.
And talking about reaching out to the rural audiences, as you pointed out, you have started off this platform on digital. How far do you think that your message or the news can reach out to the rural audience, except for states like Kerala, where the digital penetration is very less?
See, one thing, even where digital penetration is very high, please understand that the digital world is also ruled by monopolies. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Digital monopolies are the biggest and the nastiest monopolies in human history. They have one property that no other monopoly had. No other monopoly, railways, airlines, gold, mining, never had. What these guys have, digital monopolies, Twitter, Facebook, the whole lot. They own your personal data and they sell that data. They trade that data. Remember Cambridge Analytica, when Facebook revealed that 54,000 accounts had been compromised. They own, tomorrow you write an email to your friend, I'm going to Brazil for a holiday. From that minute, your inbox and side will be full of advertisements for resorts in Sao Paulo, resorts in Rio de Janeiro. They've algorithmed the human race out of its intellect. Right? So they are so much. Everybody has got your credit card data. When you buy a product on Amazon, you'll get 20 recommendations. Also look at this. Also, very often you go to your site, you will get recommendations. They know what you've been buying. They have a better record of your purchases than you do. You don't sit and note it down and feed it into a computer. So the digital monopolies are very, very, very dangerous people. So yet, in the penetration, it is true, as I have said everywhere, it is highest in Kerala and Tamil Nadu comes second, but at a distance. But the fact is that it's growing. Do you know that the percentage of people using internet on mobile is very high for Bihar and UP because the migrant laborers need a smartphone to be able to do the financial transactions, to be able to send the money home to family in Kanpur, to be able to send money home to people in Gaya, in Bihar. Many migrant workers are taking loans and buying smartphones. Now what happens there though is that they've got the smartphone, you're a migrant laborer from UP, you're sitting in Mumbai. You have got the smartphone, you paid a lot of money, taken a loan. But your 3 daughters in Kanpur, they don't have a phone, they can't access the online education during COVID. So the fact is it's growing. Like when we started People's Archive of Rural India, Pari, 66% of our readers and viewers received us on desktop laptop. Now that I think is 6% or something like that. Viewers on mobile, 72% in 8 years. So yeah, we think we are now redesigning every page with mobile first perspective.
Getting a little into the political discourse, we are heading into yet another general elections. It's been 2 consecutive terms for this ruling BJP government here. Do you really think that the opposition stands a chance in 2024?
See, I would not ever make cast in stone predictions about Indian elections. I think lots of things can happen before 2024. Look, I believe in 2019, this government was losing the election. Then you had the Pulwama incident, and that changed the voting in the north, not in the south. So who knows how many things are yet to surface before the 2024 elections. I do believe that it's open. What can happen is open. And yes, you're right. A lot of it depends on how much the opposition is able to get its act together.
You have written, you have reported, you have in fact learned a lot on the farmers' issue in the country. Do you think it has improved in any manner over at least the last few years?
No, I think that the agrarian crisis is ongoing. What has improved is the morale when tens of thousands of farmers laid siege to Delhi and forced the government to withdraw those farm laws. Now, the withdrawal of the farm laws does not mean end of the agrarian crisis. It simply means withdrawal of very regressive legislation. But what those farmers taught the rest of us is the spirit of resistance, of fighting for your constitution, fighting for your constitutional rights, fighting for democratic behavior from governments. They've given us a phenomenal example. That is their achievement. The rest of us should learn the lesson of that. But the crisis itself is not gone away.
Do you think Kerala is a farmer-friendly or an agriculture-friendly state, from whatever you have understood?
See, it's a very complex agricultural state. You are food importers, and there is an incredible amount of cash crop. I think that the same Kerala has also given the country some incredibly inspiring examples. I will say the Sangha Krishis of Kudumbashri are the finest form of ownership and small farm collaborations that I have seen. Absolutely. They were the only group of farmers in 15, 20 years, small groups that were actually making significant profits. Even their credit situation was better because Kudumbashree is such a large movement, 4.3 million members, that if I am a Kudumbashree unit in the village, the bank manager has to be cautious and courteous with me because Kudumbashree will be one of the top depositors in his bank. So they have to be, but all that took a very bad beating with climate crisis and floods. So that is a struggle now.
Well, sir, thank you so much for speaking to the Fourth. It was a great pleasure having you here. And thank you so much, sir, once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.